Hi everyone, this is Sheila Butler with Successful Women Talk. I want to say thank you for joining me today. Today's guest is Netta Jones, and Netta is the founder of LTD365, multimedia publishing platform. And I share an interesting story with Netta today. Her story is so inspiring. She talks about how she started a couple of businesses out early on in her career that eventually, after about 13 years, led her to publishing an online magazine that basically highlights everything about a woman living her dream every day. So that's LTD 365. So join me in this interview with Netta. Let's call it a chat. It was a chat with Netta. She's quite inspiring. Don't forget also to join us at www.successfulwomentalk.com. Join our email list, join the community, check out my interview with Netta, and we'll see you on the other side. Hi everyone, this is Sheila Butler with Successful Women Talk. I want to say thanks for joining us today. I am excited. We have a very special guest, Netta Jones. Now, Netta is an entrepreneur. She's an author, published 16 Weeks to Your Dream Business. She recently created a business, ltd365.com. Terrific story. Can't wait for you guys to meet her and learn more about her background. So welcome, Netta.
Thank you so much, Sheila, and thanks to all of you who are listening.
Well, thank you again for joining me. I want to say I visited your site, learned more about you, and I can't wait to share that. But why don't we start with you telling us a little bit about your background and how you got started in business?
Fantastic. So I did the corporate thing in marketing for about 10 years, just over 10 years. So out of college, public relations, advertising, you could say I was a communications person. And I always sort of had the bug to do something entrepreneurial, to do something on my own. And I thought in college I had this wild idea that I would be working in Africa with women in micro-enterprise. I really believed that's what I was going to be doing. So I had both the notion of entrepreneurship and the notion of working with women, but I haven't made it to Africa. The United States has become my Africa. So I ventured off, and the first business, I had one business that I started early on that was sort of a tester business with women bringing hand-blown glass from Prague. And this was back in the early 90s when we were just sort of having relationships with the Eastern Bloc, which is interesting. And then the first kind of real business, as I like to say, I started with my business partner who was my college roommate. She had gone off the way of buying and had worked for all the big names, and my communications background, and we decided we really wanted to work with women. We moved back to New York, where we had gone to college, and we started netandshell.com, and it was a co-op for emerging designers, and they were all female, and we were working with them to be the business arm so they could be creative. After 9 years of that, I had 3 babies, she had 2, I moved back to the West Coast, and we wanted to sort of wrap it up. How could we wrap up with a pretty bow all this information we had, all the stories we learned about women who were successful and weren't. And so we pursued McGraw-Hill with this idea to write 16 Weeks to Your Dream Business. And that's how that came to be. And I have to say, it's a very organic way. If you're in ideation mode, it's a very organic way to go through and see, does this idea really have wings? Does it have legs? Can it go somewhere? Is it viable? Because we ask a lot of questions and force you to answer things. Everything from who do you want to work with and what environment do you want to work in, all the way to forcing you to create like a budget sheet and sales forecasts and things like that. Along with a book comes a book tour. and seminars and teaching and speaking, and I loved it. I loved doing that part of it. So after about 18 months, 2 years of doing that, I thought, what's left here for me? I've been at this point now in this entrepreneurial space for 11 years working with women. What else do I have to offer? And what I realized, and you know this well, Sheila, there's so many women in this entrepreneurial space, both women looking to get into it, but actually professionals and experts and coaches and consultants and programs available for us. And I thought, who's curating that space? I know a lot of people in that space and have a lot of relationships and connections there. How can I offer that to the women who want them? So I started ltd365, as you mentioned, .com. And the intention there is just to aggregate and curate the best of the best, to talk about who's out there like you telling stories and sharing stories and advice with women so that you can you're catapulting us to the next level with the stories that you're sharing, with women who are graphic designers or coaches and consultants in branding or in marketing or whatever the case. And then also the corporate resources that are available, banks like Wells Fargo, they've been the #1 entrepreneurial resource in terms of small business. So people like that who've come alongside and said, hey, we see the vision, we see what you're doing, and we want to be a part of this. And so the first thing we did in launching LTD365 was we hosted a live event called LTD Live, and we brought all of that curated content to life. And we had 500 women show up. It was a huge success. It was absolutely wonderful. We had phenomenal keynote speakers that are all in this space, literally sort of the kings and queens of the space. So it was really great. And then this last year we did it again with great success. And this time, as I mentioned to you earlier, we really focused on how to get the content into the right hands. So if you were in startup or ideation stage, we had a lot of topical panels you could go to. We had one called This Is How She Does It. And it was all moms telling their stories of how they juggle entrepreneurship and business. And then we had several financial ones. What do you do when you are making money, and what do you do before you make money? How do you manage that? How do you get to that place? So, and excuse me, if you were in growth mode, then we offered a lot of seminars that were taught by 1 or 2 experts that were very sort of laser focused and could help you get to the next level. So that was LTD Live. And then in just a few weeks ago, we launched ltdmag, which I have to say I'm crazy excited about. And if I was totally honest, I think this is what was in my head the whole time. I view myself as a publisher of content, whether it's in a live format or in a digital magazine, and bringing to life stories of women who've succeeded, telling about their not quite successes, their failures, talking about what resources are available to those of us who are launching, starting, and growing a business, hearing from experts, very specific kind of bullet form advice on things that you can do that are real takeaways. And then we also include all the eye candy that we tend to like as women. What to wear to a meeting, how to decorate your office. It's really the lifestyle of an entrepreneur all in one magazine. So so that's what I've been up to.
I love that, and I love how I have a lot of things I want to touch on, but I love how you talked about you finally come full circle back to what you had in what you thought your vision was all along.
It only took 13 years.
That's okay. I consider those, some people go, oh, well, that was a failure. I don't even consider it a failure. Those are like stepping stones, or we're building character. So it just took you a bit to get there.
That's right. And most of us have watched this, but there was that great piece in the video, the Stanford video that, oh my gosh, why is his name escaping me?
Steve Jobs?
Steve Jobs.
Yes.
That Steve Jobs talks about that when you're at the end, everything else is really clear. And I don't want to butcher his own words, but everyone should watch that video because it's so true. The laser focus comes later. It comes almost looking back, and you just you got to keep going, keep moving, keep poke the box, right?
Exactly.
As Gladwell would say,
I love
and
that.
keep taking advantage of the opportunities.
Yeah, and you know what I really like about that is that it's not that you didn't always do what you wanted to do, but it took all of those things to help you get to where you wanted to be.
Yes.
And now you have so much more insight and information to share. It's even better.
That's true. And I will say, from a logistical and even a marketing point of view, we launched when I first had my the Net and Shell business, the working with women designers. We launched something called a magalog, and it was a physical, actual piece where we told the stories of the designers, and then it was a catalog. You could order from it. And what the digital magazine does is consumers are in a place where they can receive that. It it was a great idea, but it was too early.
Too early.
People didn't like the idea of content and consumerism coming together. And if you're from the publishing world at all, you understand that there's always been a separation of church and state, editorial on one side and advertising on the other. And we've meshed that in a way that consumers are okay with now. Most monetized blogs and blogazines and online magazines are really a combination of that, and that's what makes them successful. And we as consumers, as long as we know that people are being transparent and saying that's the case, we're okay with it. So some of it is the market sometimes has to catch up, and the timing has to be right, and consumers need to be ready to embrace it. And I think if you just keep plugging away, the time will come. You got to be smart about how you plug away, obviously. I could have shaved off probably 5 years if I was a little smarter, but that's okay.
That's okay. It's a good learning experience.
Absolutely.
Now you can teach others not to take that path.
Amen, sister. That's right.
Another thing that I like that you said was back when you guys launched your online catalog, it was a little bit too early. You were still at that point, already back then, sharing stories. And I think stories make such a difference in business and networking and really connecting with someone.
Yes. Absolutely. And I often say that women in particular, we learn through the story. And I think part of it is it's more compelling, so it draws us in. But the other thing is it ends up being the most transparent way we can view ourselves in that person's shoes. Because that person is being vulnerable and honest. They're not necessarily giving advice. They're just sharing their story. So you see the broken parts of the story. You see the pain in the story. You see the success and the victory in the story. And you take what you can from it. And even at the conference, you know, on the main stage, I always say to the speakers, just tell us your story. We don't necessarily need to be inspired with a lot of lovely quotes. Just tell us your story. These are really savvy women in the audience, and they can take from it what they need to. And then we can get into the nitty gritty in the panel discussions and things like that.
Absolutely, I love that. I love that. Because I think so many people learn from other women and people and stories. You know, a lot of people ask, because I have a business life outside of Successful Women Talk. So I have some people like my mom and some friends. Why are you doing this? What is your purpose? And my purpose is that when I started my very first business, I really didn't have a mentor. And then, you know, as I've learned more about business, I realized if you Google a successful entrepreneur, most of the time it's a man that pops up.
Yeah.
And there are so many women out there doing amazing things. And I think we can learn so much from them. And they're just not highlighted, in my opinion, as much as they should be. So I love what you're doing. And that's the same reason why I do a show like this. I think it's just important. People like yourself, if someone can see that you're a mom of 3, you have a busy home, a busy life, and you run a successful business. How do you do it? You make it happen. And here's your story. I just love it.
Yeah, and tell your mom that we need you to keep doing this. That's why.
I will.
So many of us need to hear from people like you, and you talking to other women who are in various phases of entrepreneurship to inspire us, to teach us, the way, different ways. There's a million ways to skin a cat, and that's kind of what we're doing here. We're skinning cats.
Exactly.
So I very much appreciate what you're doing, and I get what you're doing.
Thank you. I appreciate that as well. Let me ask you, how hard was it to just launch doing a live event? Because live events are kind of scary, and I've never launched one, but from what I've talked to other people, it's not an easy project to conquer, and that's how you started.
Think of your wedding. If anybody put together a traditional wedding, it's kind of that times 10, because there's multiple grooms involved and mother-in-laws and mothers in terms of your corporate sponsors and your speakers and even your attendees. I remember one situation in the very first conference where we had a green room and I was interviewing all the experts. I had all these people here, so I wanted to kind of get the content on video. And an attendee came in and opened her sandwich and showed it to me and said, "What is this?" And she had mayonnaise in her sandwich and apparently had requested no mayo. So it's amazing the amount of detail that goes into something like, I just had to laugh that she sought me out in particular to show me this. And I think that's sort of a nice anecdote for what it takes to put on an event. having said that, I really encourage people, if you can do it, meaning if you have, it's time. It's really about time and managing your time. And I will say you're pulling all-nighters those last few weeks, and it's a little nutty. Get a great team of people around you. Corporate sponsorships allow for you to pay for a lot of that. And understand with real clarity who it is you want to talk to. Saying I want to talk to women is not enough. Saying I want to, really identify who your target market is, and they'll come. They'll find you. And now with Twitter and Facebook and all these opportunities we have to engage with people, it's a lot easier. It's a huge undertaking, but I did it. I launched the event in front of the magazine, even though the magazine was really what I wanted to do, because I knew I would just be another digital piece of content in outer space. If I launched the event and we did it well, and we created a real brand at the event, people really identified with who we were, that I was going to have 500 mouthpieces talking for me, and 500 people who felt really engaged with me and loyal to me. And when I say me, I mean the brand, sure. LTD65. So that's the great thing about having live events. There's so many now for women, and there's so many programs for women, so that's why you got to get real clear on who you want to talk to, who that audience is, and how do you connect with them. I wanted really savvy women who were slightly older, meaning, you're going to laugh, but 35 to 55 was my sweet spot. They've already had a career. They've already done something. This is really about pursuing a passion. This is about a flexible lifestyle. This is about making their own money, calling their own shots. And I knew that woman would come into our event, and she's been to many, many, many events. So I wanted to capture her attention with great speakers, a well-organized conference, pretty. Literally, it was beautiful. The brand was very obvious. It was clean. It was direct. It was empowering, but it was full of information. It wasn't just a rah-rah session. And rah-rah sessions are necessary to some degree. We forget we don't have those opportunities. So for all of you who are putting an event together, you need to inspire people. Yes, it's hard, but I still recommend it.
I love that. I love it, and you weren't afraid. And I love to talk to women about that, because it sounds like you just knew you needed to do it, and you just did it.
Yes. Yeah, and let me say, because again, I think transparency is key. I didn't use family money. I didn't go in with, my husband doesn't make $1 million a year, and I just decided to put this thing together. Zero money. I went to corporate sponsors. I said, when I get my first big sponsor, then I know that this is the right thing. And once you get that person, it kind of moves the ball forward. So we got IKEA right off the bat. Made a lot of sense. They have home office stuff. That's the audience I'm speaking to. And from that, we were able to get Wells Fargo and HP and Cigna Health. And they all provided something to the entrepreneurial women. So I was smart about the sponsors I went after too. We went after people that were resources to our end user. We didn't go after just anybody who had money. And they all came back year two. Well, HP didn't, but because they didn't. But they're coming back next year. Yeah, that whole division kind of collapsed when they, but now we've got Meg at HP, and so we'll see if that turns around a little bit. So you kind of have to just go for it. You really do. I
love that. Let me ask you this: if someone said to you, "I'm a lady," or you'd know by talking to them, I want to start a business. I have an idea. I want to start a business. I'm not really sure. I'm a little bit afraid. What advice would you give that lady?
And this is not a plug, I promise, but I would have them do a book like mine, if not mine. Because it'll ask really specific questions. I often find when people talk about having an idea that they just need to flush it out. Sometimes, if it's a baby rattle, well, have you looked at all the baby rattles that are out there? What makes yours different? What makes it unique? Do you have an audience in place? Do you hang out with a bunch of moms who need something like this? I think the viability part of it is just smart. It's just some good homework. And I realize in talking to people, a lot of people just haven't done that kind of homework. Everybody has a good idea. Everybody you talk to has multiple good ideas. Also, Tim Ferriss, I think it was Tim Ferriss, but he gave the 4-Hour Work Week guy, he gave some advice about just kind of doing it, like just kind of getting it off the ground. And that really, that's like a 30-day period to kind of just get that information off. Just go for it. I guess that leads me to the advice I actually would give her. Yes, go do some homework, but also in going for it, in just moving forward, you will realize what the holes are. And a lot of people spend more time in the business plan, which I think is silliness, and the thought process, and not in the plan of action. Just move forward, and your steps forward will inform what you need to do and what the audience wants and if this will be viable. But you just got to move. It's not about spending more time thinking about it and doing the math. It's about going for it.
I agree. Let me ask you this. So we talked a little bit on the show about women being a little bit afraid to ask. So if you need something in life, you should just ask for it. So like you said, you got your first sponsor, IKEA. And did you have a relationship with them, or you formed that relationship and you just asked?
No. There was an event in downtown LA for entrepreneurial women. IKEA happened to be there, and I went to the event to look and see how they ran their event. It was a government, kind of an SBA sort of event. And there were a lot of government entities there that provide tools for entrepreneurs. And I thought, this is a good place for me to go and just see how they do it and what resources are available. And I wanted SBA to be at my event, so it was a good place for me to go meet them. And they were great, and they came, and SCORE and all those great resources. While I was there, they announced, "Thank you, IKEA, for building our lounge." And I was like, "Oh, that's IKEA. That makes sense." So I just sought out where the applause was. Where were the group of people that were smiling but not clapping for themselves? And identified those were the IKEA people. Went and introduced myself, had my business card, and just really connected with the woman who happened to be the director. And I have to say, when I say connected, I don't mean like, we had some long conversation and we were best pals. I just literally meant I connected with her, and she was willing to talk more with me. After a phone conversation that was more about the vision than anything else, I wasn't asking for anything, she said, "Why don't you come in?" I went in, and then she said, "You know what, this is something we can absolutely get behind. How much?" And that's when most of us get so nervous, like, oh, if I charge too much, they'll say no. If I charge too little. And I said, and I just said what we needed. And she came back and said, "Well, we can't do this, but we can do this." So it wasn't about, if she was excited about the idea, the money wasn't going to be, she would have told me the money is a problem, and at that point we could have negotiated if I needed to. So I want to give that advice to women, because we tend to be really afraid when that question is asked. From that, having the name IKEA just got everybody else. I really wanted, part of our vision is to always have a philanthropic partner that gives back to women. And Tory Burch had just started a philanthropic sort of giving program to women in New York City who needed a little boost, if you will. And so I thought, that's many people in my audience like Tory Burch. That makes a lot of sense. That's a great connection. Let me get Tory Burch. So just having IKEA and Tory Burch, just even their logos on, I created these for $100, a bunch of postcards. And the Maria Shriver Women's Conference was going on in Long Beach. And I went down there. I knew there were going to be 30,000 women, and I didn't even go to any of the conference. I mean, I went to see Maria and Oprah speak, and that was it. And I just handed out the card.
I love that.
At that event, I met some other folks, and a lot of those people ended up coming on board as sponsors.
That is terrific. I think such nuggets right there, because I think it's important that, you didn't know the person from IKEA. Yeah. You went and introduced yourself, and you weren't afraid to ask.
Yeah.
You weren't afraid to negotiate when it came down to negotiating, had you needed to do that. And then you were smart enough to see what else was going on in your community and using those resources, and it didn't cost you anything additional because you were the team was already there. You just kind of took advantage of that.
Yes. And I went to a place where my story was going to connect with other sponsors. Going to a women's conference, and many of us you have in Texas, we have a women's conference that's funded by the state, and often it's the governor's conference or the governor's wife's conference. And that's a place where the sponsors that are there already care about, in my case, my message, and probably a lot of your listeners, that message. So, I didn't go to a car sales show and wonder why no one wanted my postcard or wanted to become a part of what our movement and what we were doing. So I think identifying those, and also in my situation, based on what I was building, in the beginning, it looked like I was going to my competitors and saying, hey, come to my conference. And I remember a couple of them, they were all programs for women entrepreneurs and mompreneurs and things like that. And one of them was like, Netta, aren't we competition? She's somebody that I know. And I said, no, because I don't provide any programming. I'm strictly a publisher. I'm aggregating and curating this content. So all these people ended up coming in year one, somewhat reluctantly, but like, oh, I think I need to be there because I like what she's putting together. And what ends up happening is there's 500 women, and each one of them have a chunk of that 500. There's a program that we have here in LA that's much more to creative, kind of the hit, kind of set. And her entrepreneurial program really appeals to them. So those women who were at my conference naturally aggregated or naturally went to her. And then the other women who were much more corporate, came from a corporate background, they were much more interested in another national program for women who they were all there. So we had 4 of them. And they were all competitors, but they were like, we all belong here because we all can have a piece of the pie. So making friends with your competitors in a way that's smart, don't be silly. I mean, in a way that's really smart and can catapult all you, I think is another way, depending on your business, to go about that.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I watched your video on your website about competitors, and I think it's such a great point because, and I think you've said this throughout the interview, is that throughout our chat, is that you have to narrow down your market and know who your ideal customer is. Yes. And even though it's not just women, they are women, but you're in a sub-segment of that. And so a lot of times I think people think, oh, I can't talk to that person because they're my competitor. Actually, you can help each other so much.
Yes. And if you're so aligned, if what you're doing and who you're doing it for is so aligned and they already exist, then you might need to think about what sort of secret sauce you have to offer. And, not to get corny, but we are all individuals. And I believe wholeheartedly that we were put on this earth to do something that only we can do. If you choose not to do it, then you've robbed the world of something. So identify what that is that you have to offer. I happen to be a person that likes to connect with people. I like to build relationships, and I have that to offer to my greater audience. I don't want to create programming. I don't necessarily want to be the person who's saying, here are the 5 steps to doing X. I have the experience to do it, but that's not what I feel like I have to offer. So once my competitors, I never viewed them as competitors because I knew what I was doing was slightly different. But once they got a hold of that, like, oh, I understand her story. Actually, she's a great resource for me, and I'm a great resource for her. That completely changed, and they ended up going back to their audiences and saying, hey, don't forget to come to LTD Live. So learning how to twist that story is really fundamentally coming from who are you and how are you different from those people.
Absolutely. You get a lot of cross-promotion there. It's so beneficial.
Yes.
Well, let me ask you this. If someone wanted to connect with you, where would be the best place? I want to ask you again, when's your next event? And then where would you like for them to connect with you at?
The next event is in the spring, but we don't have an exact date. So it'll be here in LA. It will be likely sort of the beginning of March. We really want to get women when they're in a new space, kind of a spring, let's start thinking differently where the weather's getting warmer. But we don't know when. Go to our website, ltd365.com, click on live. It's on the right-hand side, LTD Live, and all the information will be there. You can also view videos and things like that from past events where I've interviewed people. There's some really fun people. Last year we had Ricky Lake come, and she did our closing and just kind of talked about the importance of women connecting and supporting one another. We had Lee Rhodes, who was just named Entrepreneur of the Year by Entrepreneur Magazine. Check out her story. Get her, interview her, find her. I'll make a connection with
I would
you.
love for you to make the connection.
Her whole story starts with cancer, and it's just so amazing, so amazing. And she blows these amazing votives out of Seattle and has this extraordinary business. But Kate Somerville, the kind of esthetician to the stars, she was there and gave this started out of an alcoholic family situation and just rose to her success. And so go, and all that's available to you for free. Check that out on LTD Live, and then LTD Magazine too. Also, just subscribe. It's free. We won't give your information or name to anybody. Everything can be found on ltd365.com. And I will say, there's a way to reach me. Just go to the contact and you can email me. If you have any questions, anything you want answered, I'm happy to help.
Perfect. Netta, I appreciate it. And I will encourage everyone, go out, check the website out. I'm going to try to attend the event this year. I think it's going to be super fabulous. I also just subscribed to the magazine. Can't wait to, I think I got an email a minute ago that says I was cleared. So I'm ready to look at that as well.
Good.
I appreciate your time. Love what you're doing, and I certainly appreciate everything that you've done for me today.
Thank you, Sheila. Thanks. Bye, all.
Thanks. Bye, guys. Thank you. Okay, that's our show, and thanks again for tuning in. Hey, I have a huge favor. I'd like for you to join us over at www.successfulwomentalk.com. Join our email list, and on that list, you'll be a VIP. You'll be receiving all of our newest updates, newest interviews, our newsletter, and any tips and tricks we have for organizing your business and getting raving fans and customers that actually just sing your praises. So again, thanks again for tuning in. Check us out next week for another episode of SuccessfulWomenTalk.com. Thanks, guys.